So we have to build trust, and we have to accept that once you start looking into your value chain, you may not like what you see necessarily. And that doesn't mean that that's an immediate red flag, stop, you now can't source from them. What that means is, okay, now we have a problem. How do we work to resolve this with that partner?
Hi everyone, I am Martina, and today with ID Factory we have Deborah Taylor. Deborah is the Managing Director at Sustainable Leather Foundation and consultant at United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. She previously managed the Leather Working Group for 5 years, working with tanneries in countries around the world, CEOs and directors of largest global luxury brands, chemical and machinery suppliers, and NGOs. So our key discussion topic for today is going to be how brands can implement a sustainability change in fashion. And we are also going to focus on the topic of transparency and traceability in sustainability transition management. So, hi Deborah, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. Where are you right now?
I'm in the UK, in the centre of the country, so lucky enough to be able to work from home. So I'm surrounded by fields and wonderful countryside in the UK.
Oh, that's amazing. We are all staying at home this period. I'm at home as well in Italy, in Modena. And I can understand that it's beautiful to have at least the nature around you. Otherwise, it's getting quite difficult sometimes.
Yeah. Enjoying the countryside, long walks and fresh air.
That's good. So, Deborah, let's tell us a little bit about your job at the Sustainable Leather Foundation.
So the Sustainable Leather Foundation was created because we really felt that there was a need to bring together the best of what the industry does, and to fill the gaps where work isn't being done yet. So it was really a case of bringing everything together in a holistic way, and then being able to communicate that work into information that consumers can hook into and resonate with. So we're working to create a dashboard approach to transparency within the leather industry, which will culminate with QR technology at the consumer end so that they can have trust and faith in the products that they're buying and in the leather value chain that they're buying from.
Could you please tell us a little bit about all the dimensions you are communicating with your QR code? So which are the information that you focus on sustainability?
Yep. So we're looking at the 3 pillars of sustainability. We're looking at the environmental dimension, we're looking at the social dimension, and we're also looking at the governance dimension. And there are lots of elements that interlink throughout those 3, especially when we're working at an operational level. And we know that there's been a lot of good work done on the environmental front, but bringing those 3 dimensions together into one system, which is a fully inclusive approach, is really important for us. So that's what we're doing.
Perfect. And we also know that you work as consultant at United Nations Economic Commission for Europe on a specific project advancing transparency and traceability of sustainable value chains in the garment and footwear industry. Could you tell us a little bit more about this project?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. I think everybody knows that traceability and transparency is becoming more and more important. They're hot topics across the fashion industry, not just within the leather remit, but wider within the whole fashion industry. And we also recognize that there are real challenges within that. And the project that the UNECE has embarked on is to find a way that creates the framework and the infrastructure by which people can address traceability with a standard set of criteria. So it's technology agnostic, it's provider agnostic. It's not saying you must use this company or this system or this technology. What it's trying to do is come up with a set of data parameters that everybody can apply globally for the purposes of giving good traceability, and that leads on to better transparency of practices. So it will open the door for all actors in the industry to be able to demonstrate their good practice through traceability and transparency. So it's what data you should hold and exchange, and how you should exchange that data. And it could be manually exchanged, or it could be electronically exchanged. And you also have to have the ability to do a mixture of both, so that you can incorporate the full value chains right back to farm and hopefully through to post-consumption. We've got some really good examples of value chains from farm to store, and we now are looking to extend that to the post-consumption arena. So the project has been running for about 18 months now. I've came on board about a year ago, working on the leather value chain specifically. It's looking at the whole of the garment and footwear sector. So there's a counterpart that's also looking at the textile elements, but I came on board to support on the leather value chain. So the first part of the work that I've done with them was to create some reports that identify the value chain, the actors within the value chain, the sensitivities and risks associated with the leather value chain, and then how we already look at traceability. So what systems are out there already, what practices are out there already, what do we do as standard, and is there anything that's taking it from farm to post-consumption right now? The second part of that work now is we're embarking on a leather pilot for blockchain technology, where we're working with a group of brands, tanneries, traders, subcontractors, and some NGOs to pilot the efficacy of traceability through an electronic blockchain system. So that's part of the work that's ongoing right now. And then later this year, we start training. So we start capacity building, we start training the wider industry on the toolbox of this project. So how they should start thinking about what they're going to need to do to provide traceability in the future. So it's ongoing for at least another year, 18 months, the project with the UN, and it works hand in hand with the work that we're doing within the Sustainable Leather Foundation, because for us, that's the key challenge for our industry right now is transparency, and trust is really important.
These are two extremely topic. I tried to sum up everything you said. So you started assessing the risk, let's say, of the value chain. Then you work on a tool to digitalize maybe the process and work on the accuracy of data, accountability of data, like through technologies as the blockchain. And third step, you're sharing this best practice with the industry leaders and the wider network. So I want to ask you, which are the major risks you have identified with the United Nations on this topic?
So, gosh, there are a lot. There's a whole report on them, but I think labour risks are more predominantly there in the farming end of the leather value chain and the product manufacture end, where we're making the actual articles at the end of the value chain. Although there are some labour concerns within the main production part of leather as well. In terms of environmental concerns, there's resource depletion is obviously a major one. Use of chemicals and the health and safety wrapped around the use of chemicals. Pollution, effluent treatment, how we look after the outputs of the industry and what we do there. And of course, there are lots of other things that come into this in the kind of the wider context, so deforestation, biodiversity, animal welfare. So there's a whole range of different aspects that come in. Some of these aspects are upstream or downstream to the main leather manufacturing process, but within the overall terms of the fashion industry, then these are concerns that we all should share. So yes, addressing those concerns can be assisted and supported through really good, clear transparency. And that's not saying that you have to be doing everything perfectly right now, but it's saying that through traceability and transparency, you'll know where you are. You'll know what your starting position is. And that then leads you to be able to make those changes for the better, to address those risks and have safeguards for them.
That's really, I totally agree, because how can you start to really define a roadmap for change if you don't know even where the problems are in your value chain, your supply chain, because these supply chains in the fashion industry are extremely complex. There are so many different actors. So I would like us to ask you how you share this best practice with brands. Where do you start from? Or where do you think in the future we should start from your experience as well?
So for the Sustainable Leather Foundation, what we've created is a transparency dashboard. So brands and retailers can use this dashboard with their value chains to see exactly what the status is right now. So each of the modules that we're looking at of sustainability, so the environmental, social and governance, have their own wheel on this dashboard. And it's a very, very simple, straightforward traffic light approach. If it's grey, there's no assessment of that module yet. They haven't started it. If it's green, they've passed that module. If it's orange, it's work in progress. And if it's red, they've failed that assessment. So you can see at a glance exactly what they've got. The other beauty of the system is that it's modular. So you don't need to have everything assessed all at one go. You can tick things off as you achieve them and as you get there. We're also fully inclusive. So this dashboard doesn't just show work that's been done with the Sustainable Leather Foundation. It will also show work or certification or verification or testing that's been done with other organizations. Because we firmly believe that as long as an organization, a tannery it may be, or a chemical company or another value chain actor, as long as that company is doing their due diligence and doing what they need to do, then it doesn't matter who they do it with, as long as it's correct. It has to meet the standard. If it meets the standard, we'll display it, we'll show it, and it can grow. The brands can use it to understand what's going on. It will show clear metrics, so they'll be able to understand what the energy consumption of a facility is, what the water consumption of a facility is, what the treatment parameters are. We're going to be working with the effluent treatment plants. We're going to be working with farming groups. We're going to be working with the meat packers and across the industry to try to create this really inclusive approach to value chain transparency.
Thank you. And I also want to ask you, because I totally understand the need for transparency, and it's extremely interesting that you are using a kind of traffic light signal. So it's really easy to understand for anyone, even someone who has no background in sustainability. And that's, I think, is an extremely important point, because there is the knowledge that really needs to be built on a topic that's actually quite new for many brands in fashion. So I will ask you, would like to ask you, what do you think is a key challenge you are facing when dealing with different stakeholders and trying to support them in this transition? What do you think is still missing in the fashion industry to really speak about transparency and traceability and being effective?
That's an interesting question, and it does vary. I mean, there are some brands and retailers who have been working on this independently for many years and are really making great strides in the work that they're doing. And they do have really good visibility over their value chains and the partners that they work with, and they do see it as a partnership. For others, it's a really daunting task. And it's one thing to understand things superficially, but if you really want to do that deep dive and really want to make change, it's a huge undertaking. And that can be quite a scary proposition for brands and retailers. So actually, it's about supporting them to so that they know as well, they don't have to do this all in one go. You know, this could be a 5-year project for some brands, because first you've got to identify. Within that identification period, you've got to have the trust with your value chain that you're not trying to cut them out. If you work with traders, for example, those traders are going to be fearful that actually, if you know who they're sourcing from, you're not going to go to them anymore. You're going to go direct to where they get their material from. So you have all these different challenges that will impact on the freedom to really work to sort out this issue. But within SLF's platform, the intention is that each actor can put their information into the system, and they don't have to declare it to everybody in the value chain. As long as it's declared in the system, then other people just know that that's been verified. It's demonstrable. Somebody has audited that. Somebody has checked that information. We know the origin, we know the destination, we know the production type, whatever it might be. You know, if it's about use of chemicals, if it's about sourcing from certain regions or not, if it's about whether or not they're using renewable energies, whatever it is that the brand needs to ensure, they can do it through the system without having to know all of the information. So we have to build trust, and we have to accept that once you start looking into your value chain, you may not like what you see necessarily. And that doesn't mean that that's an immediate red flag, stop, you now can't source from them. What that means is, okay, now we have a problem. How do we work to resolve this with that partner? You know, if you see something that's wrong, how can you affect change with them? Because there's no point in just pulling away from that problem and saying, well, I'm going to source somewhere else, because the problem then still remains. It just becomes somebody else's problem. So the better idea is to work with them, resolve it together. It may be that you need a group of brands to come together to resolve a problem, or a group of tanneries to come together to resolve a problem. But collaboration, working together, is another key ingredient to success when we're thinking about making these really systematic changes that need to be adopted across the value chain. But it does start with the brands. You know, and they're also the conduit to the consumer. When we're talking about that link to the consumer, they are very important. So the communication that they put out and the messaging that they promote is also really important to the work that we're doing. And there's a big responsibility in that for them. So we want to support that process as well by the dashboard giving them the tools that they need to make accurate communication to the consumers. And that way we start avoiding this greenwashing. We know it happens. It sometimes backfires significantly for brands and retailers, and consumers are getting a little bit wise to that now. You know, they don't need all the really technical information, but they do need that information broken down into bite-sized pieces of information that they can relate to and, crucially, believe and have trust in. And it's about building that brand reputation so that people understand, yes, I know this brand is doing the right thing. I know they work well with their partners. And to be fair, where they source from, as long as it's responsible, isn't the major issue. It's how they do it. And that's where the governance comes in. It's how are you working with your suppliers? And I think gone are the days where brands can just source on price. There's so much more involved now. You can't just look for the cheapest cost for your materials. You have to look beyond that at what you're being given for that price, and accept that sometimes you have to pay a little bit more to have complete faith in your value chain.
You touched many different important points. So let's try to sum up a little bit. So you said, of course, that there's a really difficult transition process. Since we started speaking about the risks involved in the value chain, there are many risks, and sometimes you don't like what you find. So you really have to shape a roadmap to start at least to start the change, and you also need to be responsible, build trust, and communicate it to the customer. And I think that a really important topic you highlighted is that maybe a platform, a tool, or something that can really be used to share the valuable information that there are behind your statements, sustainability statements, so to prove them is important. So I want to ask you, what do you think the technology can play a role in this transition and in transparency and traceability?
The sharing of information is another really important point, actually, because that's one of the reasons why we created the collaboration hubs that we have at SLF, because we wanted to have an environment where industry could come together and share best practice and share information, or even share, well, we've been working on this, but we're struggling here. We can't find a solution for this. Share the problems as well as the ideas, to try to encourage more cohesive thought process. If we work collectively, we can work quicker, stronger, and better. So the more we work together, the better. But I think for brands particularly, technology supports them through the ability to control messaging and through the ability to then demonstrate that conformance and compliance. So, for example, with the QR technology, we can point that QR technology and focus it specifically to what that particular brand can demonstrate. So if we have a brand and they have an article range where they know they have all 3 pillars of sustainability covered, we can show that through that QR technology. However, if they can only demonstrate the environmental component right now, then that QR code will only talk about the environmental component. So it's about really being clear about what is and isn't demonstrable right now. And then you can talk about the things that you're working on to bring up that full picture in the fullness of time. And it could be a roadmap. And we can direct consumers to our website, to a brand's website, to a combination of both, to really tell that story. A key link for brands is making sure that the sustainability teams, the sourcing teams, and the marketing and communication teams are communicating internally. This is something that quite often falls apart because the sustainability team will be working with organizations like us, but we won't necessarily be talking with the marketing people. And so the messages can be a bit conflicted. And there's another element within this, if we think about alternative materials in fashion. Brands and retailers have a responsibility to offer choice to their consumers. And there are all sorts of different lifestyle choices that people make. However, lifestyle choice is not sustainability. The two things are different. They should be decoupled. And brands have to be really aware of that, because sometimes alternative materials are sold with a sustainable tag to the detriment of other natural products. And actually, they could be far less sustainable in real terms than the natural alternative. So there is a responsibility for brands and retailers to really understand the messaging that they're delivering, because they might be doing it from a good position without realizing the unintended consequences of that message. So it is really important that lifestyle and choice is removed from the sustainability story, and that each product in a range within fashion rests on its own sustainability laurels and not trading off something else, either positively or negatively. And it's something that I talk about a lot when I think about tanneries particularly. The environmental priorities for a tannery in India are going to be completely different to the environmental priorities for a tannery in South America, for example. In South America, your environmental priority is going to be deforestation. In India, your environmental priority is going to be water scarcity. So you have different concerns, you have different parameters, you have different climates to consider. So each tannery, each facility should be comparing itself against itself when it comes to sustainability, not a tannery on the other side of the world, because the two things are different. So it's about your impact, it's about your responsibility, it's about your governance, and it's about showing that within your environment and your own geography, you're doing the best you can for people and planet, and looking after all those elements.
You share really interesting insight. Really, sustainability maybe is more about looking at what you are and what you are doing, rather than try to figure out what's the best marketing strategy or business strategies to convince your customers to buy more. So really interesting conversation. I have a tricky question for you, and we're almost done. If you had the magic power, what would you do to make the fashion industry more sustainable?
Gosh, more honesty. I would make them all be a little bit more honest about what they're doing and the reasons why.
I like it. It's straightforward and it gets right to the point, honestly.
And it brings everything in, you know. I think if you're honest, you become accountable. If you become accountable, you start working on those challenges. If you start working on those challenges, we start seeing improvements right the way back through the value chain. But it starts with the brands. It starts with taking that big, long look at yourself and saying, okay, you know you're struggling against the need for profit and the need to protect. You have to try and find the balance within that. And the only way you can do that is to take the blinkers off, you know, and warts and all, let's have a look and let's sort it out, and one step at a time.
Amazing. I totally agree. And how did you discover the ID Factory? That's the final question for today.
Well, I knew of the work being done through Leather Working Group. And when I was managing Leather Working Group, I think I'd had a few email dialogues with Massimo a few years ago. And then actually we connected through LinkedIn, and it was really quite organic that we just happened to like each other's posts, and then Massimo got in touch to have a better conversation, and we started from there. So yeah, but I've kind of known about you guys, and I think through some mutual organizations in Italy as well, that you get to know of each other, don't you? So yeah, and now we're working much more closely together because we do have shared ideals and philosophies about how we see things and where we see things going in the future for the industry, and really about helping and supporting the industry for better outcomes.
Thank you, Deborah. It was a super interesting conversation, and thank you for sharing your experience with us. I hope you enjoyed it as well.
I did. I really enjoyed it, and yeah, thank you for having me again.
Thank you.
Thank you.